Tara be the jury, take one jury person from each table.
All day.
Yeah.
2 minutes, guys, let's make sure our lawyers know what they're saying. Have a nice little case going against the other people.
It's the one that has.
You're right, it looks like it. I'm doing soccer. I would actually play, but when I throw it, I look like a girl. Yeah, right? Facilitators, let's keep our legal team focused. That's part of our grade, right? Focus, focus.
Has to do with Yellowstone. In a way.
Because it doesn't affect the grade.
There's also
No, I mean, like, I can throw a ball.
Could you imagine if an elk and a wolf? No.
Oh my god.
Is it impossible? Yes.
Are lawyers ready over here? We got Jonathan representing us. Team No Effect.
Are you though?
Team No Effect. We got Mr. Morales. We got Andrew, Mr. Gates. Team No Effect. And we got Mr. Jones. Team No Effect. You guys see your competition over here? Mr. Jones, Mr. Gates, and Mr. Morales. Team No Effect. PJ, you gotta support your team. Give them all the evidence they need
Who's
to
over
lose.
there? You introduced us at this now.
I'm about to. Over here, we have Team Yes Effect with Mr. Albertson, Mr. Gallagher. I never remember your last name. And how do you say your last name, Yvonne? Messadou? And Mr. Messadou. We got a tough legal team over here. We ready to go at it? Remember, this is a friendly debate. Friendly debate, right? Are we ready?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not feeling good today, Yvonne. That's fine. What about me? Representative.
We're picking our
I got you. All right, guys, so let's have our head lawyers of the case.
I will keep start crying.
We have a substitute over here.
Matt, you're the head lawyer.
We have Miss Kelly. We had an illness on the stand. Miss Kelly's going to step in.
Yes.
So we got Miss Kelly, Mr. Albertson, and Mr. Gallagher facing the tough, feared Mr. Morale, the undefeated Mr. Gates, and Mr. Jones. Are we ready? All right, guys. Consult your legal team.
Everything we have.
Are we ready? Quiet in the courtroom. The Honorable Miss Fessman is presiding. Are you ready? First, I'd like to hear from... Who wants to start this off? Let's start it off with the Team No Effect.
Let's start first.
Oh no, she picked you guys first.
Team No Effect, I think you guys got this.
I
I would like to hear from Team No Effect, please. Those representing Team No Effect, please stand, please rise, and please present your first bit of evidence.
Okay.
Okay, whatever, that's just for your help. Whatever you think. First piece of evidence, we're addressing our first piece of evidence.
So, in the 1920s, hunting and trapping in Yellowstone eliminated all the wolves. So, this means that without any wolves, the other populations in the creek
and the river streams remained the same. Nothing depleted and nothing was overflowing because the wolves had no effect on the rivers at all. Because elks and plants still took water from the rivers, but there was no major change at all throughout the entire park.
You have anything to add, Mr. Gates?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what's
So,
that?
we didn't see a whole crisis in Yellowstone where all of a sudden the rivers were depleting, like Jonathan said. There was no like, oh my gosh, Yellowstone's going to be completely dry, and nothing really changed. We didn't see on the news like, oh, Yellowstone's going crazy, the ecosystem's going crazy.
So, no effect.
Is it the same?
Right, no effect.
All right. Team yes effect. Can we refute that? Do we agree with that evidence?
No.
What's going on?
Yeah, we should like report back saying this.
All right, guys, let's refute this. We need to go back and forth 5 times.
Wait, do I read the evidence?
However you want to refute their evidence.
Can someone give me number one?
I'm coming back.
You have number one?
Yes, I have number 1. Mr. Robertson.
Let's be ready before I call contempt in court. Gotta be ready.
Okay. So, the evidence is, during the 1920s, hunting and trapping eliminated wolves from Yellowstone National Park. And, so, our thing is, wolves have an effect on abiotic vaccinating systems, such as birds and streams. That evidence can go with our, what's the thing called?
Go with your case, your whole stance.
Yeah, go with our case because, well,
Because wolves, if wolves don't eat elks, then these elks overpopulate, which leads to them eating more plants, producing more waste. And waste goes into rivers, which pollutes the water. And like you guys said, there is no evidence. You guys said, the flu says there's no data confirming any of this evidence. Which means, how do you know the lakes didn't dry up? Or the rivers didn't dry up?
We have rivers right now.
They could have-
You have no
Maybe.
evidence. No
Maybe.
proof.
no proof, no proof.
All right, are we rested on the defense?
Yes.
All right, the defense rests their case. Does the prosecution want to present their next piece of evidence? Prosecution, present your next piece of evidence. We're not cross-examining witnesses, not the next. Why are they witnesses? All right, guys, next piece of evidence. Listen up over here. You need to know what they're saying so you can refute it.
So as you guys already know, in the 1990s, wolves got reintroduced to this national park. And yeah, so they put enough in to reproduce, which then led to kind of like normalization of what it used to be, that park.
And the elk population did decline because the wolves, being tertiary consumers, consumed the elks, and still the water remained the same. And as Mr. Gallagher said, that while the waste could pollute the river, we still have rivers now, showing that it didn't do much. And also that the wolves keep everything in check, but also aren't really needed because throughout the 70 years or so without the wolves, the rivers were fine, nothing changed, and as there was no evidence before that to refute that, yes, the wolves did have a change, but also there's no evidence after that to show that the wolves had a major change.
And also to add to your last claim where the rivers could have dried up, there are laws that when you make a national park, you are not, other than building small lodges, you're not allowed to carry out large construction projects. A large construction project would have been required to make man-made lakes and rivers.
All right, how do we feel about that evidence? Feeling a little salty, Matt said. All right, guys, you want to listen to our refutation over here? They listened to your evidence very nicely. Let's give them some respect in the courtroom.
So, our evidence is that wolves were reintroduced in the 1990s to Yellowstone, and when they came back, we started to obviously start eating the elk again. And when they kill the elk, they leave waste. They leave the cartridges, cartilage.
Cartilage.
They leave carcasses. And so usually elk eat their food by rivers. That's where the plants and stuff are living. And they're not clean. So when the wolves hunt the elk by rivers, they feed them carcasses, and that usually gets inside the lakes and the rivers. And it,
So we're sticking with the pollution theory.
yeah.
All right, so we're affecting with the pollution. Objection over here. Okay, guys, so I just want to keep moving us along. Alex, say something real quick, and we got to move through our next 3 clues so that we can find out the answer to this case.
If wolves didn't affect the rivers when they were gone, why would they ever put them back in?
If there was no effect, why even put them back?
Why would they bring the wolves?
If it was perfectly fine, why would they ever put them back in?
Why put them back in?
So obviously they're.
It's actually my turn.
Obviously they're important.
This is a nice debate.
Exactly.
I'm gonna be here
Exactly. Okay.
All right, guys, third piece of evidence. Let's review this. Good job, guys. Good job on both sides.
Quality answer.
Quality answer.
But we gotta move this along, guys, okay? We wanna find out the truth.
So, with your last part about why would they introduce them back in, it introduces them because national parks are tourist attractions. You go to Yellowstone Park to look at animals, so they wanted to be able where people see, ooh, wolf.
Okay, so let's address the next piece of evidence now. Number 3.
Okay, next piece of evidence is that everyone knows elk is the favorite food of the wolf, and the reason that those people reintroduced those wolves is because through those 70 years, the elk population, although people were still trapping to keep the population down, it was a lot more overpopulated than when it had in the beginning. So to put those wolves back in was more of a natural way to allow the elk population to decline while not affecting any other things. So, yeah.
Do we have a refute to this? Evidence number 3, Ron. Guys, stay standing up. It saves time.
I have one more thing to say.
Oh, you missed your turn.
Can I go over there and like talk to them while they're standing up?
Guys, you got 30 seconds. to
Not right
review
now,
this.
in between
Evidence
now.
number 3.
You said, Andrew, you said that they brought them back to tours. What tours want to see wolves? That doesn't make any sense. You come back and see what you get, like bald or something.
All right, let's address evidence number 3.
There's bears too.
So, the food is one favorite prey of wolves, and how do you think the relationship could affect the ability of certain plants to grow? So, when the wolves kill the elk, it doesn't allow for the elk to eat the plants, which leads the plants to overpopulate. And because they overpopulate, they create more surface area, so they can't, the river systems, they won't be able to flow properly, because the plants are in the way.
Okay, so too many plants with no elk. Next, back and forth, rapid fire.
But to go with that, what it is
Go ahead.
that when more plants are produced, there's also a continuous amount of precipitation, and there's runoff from mountains, and there's groundwater, and not necessarily every plant's like water source attributes to streams. It could go from groundwater precipitation or runoff. So, the plant population wouldn't necessarily affect the streams. Okay, so next piece of evidence. Go ahead.
So the next piece of evidence is that the elk like grazing in the high mountains, but there's so many, so that also refutes your other evidence that they graze near the rivers, and then the carcasses are left by the rivers and they get polluted if they're up in the high mountains.
Okay, let's refute that. Sorry, we gotta hurry up. We gotta hear both sides. Use the best evidence. Best evidence you got.
So, for evidence 4, it says how they, why would they prefer to be in the mountains rather than somewhere else? So, if they're in the mountains, they could have a preference to a certain kind of food that they like a certain species of plant. And this would affect, it might affect other plant communities because if they're in the mountains and they're eating one plant and the other plant is growing below the mountain.
So their favorite food is affecting the plant life, right?
Yeah, because they eat one plant, but the other plants are bigger.
So if they're on the mountain, they're eating the ones on the mountain, what's going on at the stream? Overpopulated,
They're
right?
populating, yeah.
Therefore affecting the stream. Okay, evidence number 5.
All right, so evidence number 5 was a question, and it was that
The absence and presence of animals, how could it affect the streams by the stream bank? But it can't have a major effect because external factors such as hunting caused the extinction of wolves in Yellowstone Park, which can attribute to natural factors. And the absence of wolves had no effect on the rivers and had a major effect on the elk, but elks had no effect on the rivers likewise. And as they said, the elks prefer grazing on the high mountains because the wolves hunt by the river stream. But wolves will migrate to the mountains for the elks, thus causing the elks to come back to the river stream, keeping everything normalized.
Okay, so we're resting our case. The wolves definitely do not affect the rivers and streams of Yellowstone. Do we have one more piece of evidence to refute, or do we rest our case?
No, one more.
One more, let's hear it.
First of all, rivers do come from mountains. So if they die on the mountains, where does it all lead to? A river, somewhere, which goes back to the ground.
That's runoff.
Yeah, wash it back down. Then where does it go?
Not directly to the stream.
Yeah,
Streams are on mountains.
Objection, Your Honor. Oh my God, I want to talk so bad.
PJ, you can whisper anything you say to them, they're just your representation.
Yeah, that's pretty good point. So like, where would the water go if it doesn't go into a big body of water?
Groundwater.
What?
On the ground.
Gets absorbed by the grass.
No.
Yeah, we learned that like
No.
last year. No. Yeah.
Anyway.
But if there was, say, there was no presence near the river, the stream banks, that means fish would overpopulate since there's nothing to affect the fish population, which leads to the more fish, the more pollution in the water, which affects the whole water.
But there's bears and wolves still
But,
feed near the.
but the evidence says what happens if there's an absence along stream bank?
There's still external factors like hunting.
Yeah.
Factors that folks can't
You
control.
gotta be supportive
You
to us.
can't attribute an absence only to the park when there's also the hunters and the tourists who go to the park to fish and also trap.
You don't
That
hunt
matters.
fish, you fish.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
This is a great debate.
National
Yes.
parks.
Yes. You have to get a
You
special
Even
fishing
your own
license.
No,
person.
you can, I'm trying to make a point. You can,
Do
but
what?
not many people do it
Guys,
because they don't
make
make
their
it for
own
recreation.
case.
They do it to monitor the.
But if you say that, then there's no point of hunting it. You just said they hunt the fish so they stay down, but then you said not much people do it.
They go to
Exactly.
Yellowstone.
Exactly, so they're overpopulated. No one goes to Yellowstone to fish.
No, the people that run Yellowstone keep that population down.
That's not.
So they go over there fishing and take fish home or something?
Yeah, what do they do with fish?
They eat it.
Eat it. No.
What else making it unquick,
PJ, you fish. When you fish, what do you do with the fish? You just like, oh, yo, I'm gonna name this one
You can
Karen,
catch
and you
it
throw
for
it back
sport,
in.
yeah.
It depends on the species of the fish.
They don't name it Carl and keep it for a pet. They just they get rid of it.
I've never heard the fish name Carl.
All right, guys, so I think that both sides have presented great evidence on the case. Let's have a seat, because real quick, we want to see the jury's out on this one. The jury is out.
The whole groundwater
Are we
thing threw me
ready?
off.
Let's find out.
No one goes to Yellowstone.
Eyes up here, guys.
She
I
set
want to
us
see
up for
everyone's
failure.
eyeballs. Let me see your eyeballs. Let me see some eyeballs, Devlin. All right, are we ready? Who wins? Dun, dun, dun.
It's a tie. No one wins.
Oh no, hold on.
No, we
Oh, it is playing.
Wait, this was a pretty big no actual win.
From the start, there was no way.
You guys just had to defend. Ready? Looks like my dog. Oh, see?
Oh, there's Carl.
Guys, listen up.
Is the speaker on the board?
A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food
All right,
chain
listen.
and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, but the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. There was less erosion, the channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
We win.
I'm buying it.
Yeah, like,
Nice try.
What do you guys think?
You said there was a prize for the winner. They were supposed to win the whole time.
No, wait, everyone stop, calm down. Calm down. Okay, listen, guys, I gotta make an announcement. Listen, so in a court case, does the person who's presenting the true case always win?
No.
No, it's whoever presents the best evidence, right?
Yeah, but we still won, Cody.
So you guys you said this isn't fair, I'm never gonna support this, there's no way this could happen, right?
That's what
Who
you
got
said.
the
That
right
was you
case?
saying.
Who got the true side?
Well,
No,
we had sportsmanship.
guys, listen up. Before you leave, one pact between us. We're not telling any other class, right? They need to have a fair debate. One pact. Don't tell anyone the truth.
really broke my
Guys, keep these papers for your reference. Keep the papers for your reference.
Game
And
over.
know what is due next week.
We
Have your
won.
important dates. Outline 4.5. 4.5, that's
Head
it.
lawyer, Matthew Robinson.
Good game.
I will lose. We don't lose. Head lawyer.
He presented a better case than you.
No, we had a pretty good.
We had a good case.
Last time I lost.
You guys could have switched your room to support us.
No, then they still win.
Andrew got really excited.
I kept thinking we were.
What's going back? You say they were on Wolfpack, yo, the
I'll figure it out, because I know you guys need the account. Thank you for your help with the tables and the
You guys
chairs.
did such a good job.
What if at the end of the thing? Don't even.
It should be 2 per table.
We won. I should have like everything you said. So who won
Maybe
the
just
doll?
look at
Who presented a better case though?
I have to think about it.
We
I'll have to look at the evidence.
Yeah, Solomon was the voiceover.
So these are numbered. This is 3.